Greetings.
Hey, John! Chaos! Chaos! Chaos!
Chouse. Transition.
Alright, give me 1 sec. I'm going to take it off push to talk so Savage can get in on this.
Good idea.
Testing, testing. Can you
Testing.
hear me now?
I can. I can hear you now, yes. The sound is
Yes. You can hear me?
good. The sound is good, yeah.
What are you thinking about?
I love that commercial.
boy.
Help! Help! We are sinking! What are you thinking about?
Okay, so I had a chance to look at the additions that you made to the language.
There's a lot of them.
Yeah, that's like a solid 4 or 5 pages. That was pretty dope.
Actually, I think it's 12 total.
12 total. Oh, whoa. Okay, I just
There's a
remember the
lot of
verbs.
stuff.
The verbs and vocab, and I had flashbacks to Spanish class and got like really angry. So I jumped down as soon as you mentioned Garens. I was like, I'm gonna run.
Oh, yeah. That's
Better
fair.
get a run on out of here. But like, it's
Gerunds.
complicated. Gerens, that's it. I'm stoked though. I mean, I'm not really. That's not my style so much, but I love the sort of world building that it brings.
Man, the nice thing about this is that I can do a little bit every day. So I don't have to like sit and muster up the energy or the inspiration to bang out, 500 words. I can just be like, I'll just make up some words.
Nice.
Yeah.
Little onesie twosie.
I've
Get
got
them down.
I've actually got a universal language dictionary document so that
Mhm.
basically it's I think it's about 1,000. Nope, it's more than that. I haven't gone through the whole thing. It's approximately 4,000 things that are basically
Essential to every language.
essential to almost every language. Yeah, I guess it's less than 4,000 because there's some gaps that I'm seeing, but somewhere in that realm, just all kinds of words. And so I'm slowly making my way through.
That's pretty awesome. It's kind of crazy to think that that's like all it takes for a universal
Functional
translator
language.
or
Yeah.
but yeah, a multicultural, like something that's universal. You'd think there'd be more than 4,000 ish things that everybody on the planet deals with. Basic.
Yeah, yeah, but I mean, like, it's the solid foundation for the ability to kind of express other more complex concepts. And that's actually kind of where I have gone with a lot of Nelarian. It's like I'm building from sort of a basic vocabulary, and some of the more complex concepts are literally just sort of combined together. You know,
Hmm.
like, for example, in English, you've got your compound words like fire truck. It's like we don't have to have a separate word when we can just put those two together.
Right.
So it's a little bit like that. The thing that I think deviates the most from any known language is the way the adjectives work.
When
Have you?
they're added on to the words themselves.
Well, yes and no. Basically, it's like you add them as suffixes to the noun that they're modifying, unless the adjective is derived from a different part of speech. For example, that like the verbals, if you're using a participial as an adjective, so something like frozen or you know something to that effect, then it gets its
Mhm.
own modification and is added afterwards.
Okay, so it goes at the later part, or
Yeah.
the order is mixed up or different. Interesting. Why that specific way? Just to be
Um,
more in line with like Latin and Spanish and things like that, or just to play with it, or is it?
Part of it was to play with it. I didn't want it to be like I'm. A lot of this is just me flipping English rules on their heads. Because for English you have the adjectives all come before the noun.
Mhm.
Um, so rather than putting them before, I kind of wanted to make them suffixes instead. But then I realized that certain adjectives are like derived from nouns or verbs, and those tend to get pretty long,
Hmm.
because you have the base word and then you modify it in some way, so it ends up being, instead of a nice little um, one or two syllable suffix that you can kind of chain together really nice and easily, you instead start getting 3 and 4 syllable suffixes that are already added on top of, your other ones, depending on how many adjectives are on top of that. So by disconnecting the adjectives, um, it also allows me to use adverbs with them.
Hmm.
So that was the third case that I added later. If an adjective is modified by another word, like an adverb, then the adjective gets detached, like as if it were derived from another word, and then you modify it with its own modifier suffix.
Broken free. Okay. Sounds like we're going into German territory almost.
I wouldn't know. I never took German.
Me either. I just had a friend in high school who, like, he enjoyed talking about it a lot, but I think it was mostly because he wanted to rant at people in German and then, like, you know, marvel at the confusion.
Yeah,
But they
well,
nouns composed of multiple nouns, composed of multiple, like, mixed ideas.
hmm,
And if I remember
interesting.
right, like, they use the appellation of nouns to specific words as a sort of adjective.
Yeah, I'm playing with that here too. Um, I mean, I don't know. I
Cool.
haven't codified everything yet, but
Hmm.
I'm working on it. How you doing, Savvy?
She was in the zone. She's going back through lore. Chaos Est, how you doing?
Oh, fine.
Awesome, awesome.
So we've been both hooked on.
Pickled.
Yeah, we tried a moonshine pickle before signing on, so we might be a little bit fuzzy. That was kind of crazy.
I caught it.
It went right back into the cup. That was awesome.
What is a moonshine pickle?
It's
Pickles soaked in moonshine in
It
a
is-
jar
it
for
is
ages.
exactly what it sounds like. Heaven help us.
Oh my, that's ambitious.
We're gonna try and survive, but it might be a bit of a struggle.
Well, hopefully we don't end up in a pickle.
Ha!
Ah.
Already thoroughly pickled. Okay. Well, yes.
Okay, well, yeah, that's just what I've been kind of working on while waiting on you guys. So
Language is neat.
Mm-hmm. So we've got a couple ideas for prompts and things along those lines. What'd you cook up in the last day and a half?
Well, since I talked to you, the two questions that I kind of wanted to think about were tropes in world building or character building, and then how much world building is too much.
So I'm going to be in the minority here because I think world building should be a secondary act to story. And this is an argument Savage and I have had in the past, but and I think we've debated it as well, but I think world is less important than plot. So Savvy, you should probably take the lead here.
There is no good plot without world.
It's very true. World is essential, but I think plots can go to any world, which makes them primary.
Why is Lord of the Rings so popular?
Because it's an epic fantasy
Because
that talks.
the world is enormous. Because you can insert yourself anywhere. Because there's so much to do and to experience and to interact with. Why is Harry Potter one of the top-selling young adult novels ever?
It
The
has
exact same reason.
but the world is so inconsistent.
But it's huge
But
and
it's true.
open.
Hmm.
It's a large open world. Why are RPGs so popular? Large open worlds.
Even though they're mostly rehashes of what's it called? Lord of the Rings. I don't know, Chaos.
So-
Where do you stand on this?
Well, I mean, the reason I'm asking the question is because I'm a little unsure of it myself. Obviously, my position is more world building. I'll even put that like that. But I do find myself like obviously I've spent instead of writing my actual story, I have spent about the last month building this language sheet. So I mean, I want to I know that that's kind of how Tolkien did it. Like he worked like he was a philologist and he kind of worked from the language and expanded outward from there. Because a language can tell you a lot about a culture, but at the same time, it's like for me, it's really I just want to, you know, I want to have that background. For me, the understanding of the underlying systems of a world is integral to understanding how the world should play out. If that makes
See,
any sense.
I think here's where I disagree. I think humanity is the nature of humanity is the fundamental axis upon which stories are based. Now, you put humanity in any specific world, they will try and adapt and live as they can, but the world is less important than the story.
I don't know. I think you were actually just saying character building is more important than world building, which is different than
Yes,
story is more important than world building.
that's very fair.
I think to make I think you really do need to have at least a baseline understanding of the way your world works to have a believable story. I mean, you could theoretically plop any plot down into any setting, and it might work, but it may not be believable. And what makes things stand out is the way the story and the world interplay. So, like your culture, the culture or the background of your, of the people, because you relate to people. The culture of the people is directly related to stuff like, history. History can be related to stuff like geography.
Schizophrenia.
Geography is directly responsible for things like, resource distribution. So, why is...
That's all super important, but it also dictates characters.
Yeah.
By a lot.
Yeah, I guess character development has roots within the world there, but
A lot so. Because that's getting into the argument of how much does culture and, tribalism basically shape personalities, which it does a lot.
Yeah,
Did
or
in
not even necessarily tribalism, but like could be even interplay of cultures.
That's also true.
Yeah.
So, for example, schizophrenia. A lot of people in America struggle with extremely negative and bad voices that tell them to do terrible things. Whereas in, I believe it's India, a lot of schizophrenics actually experience voices from angels and just uncontrollable but still fairly well wholesome.
Positive. They're more supportive voices.
Mm-hmm.
Which
is fascinating because it's culture.
I think culture feeds into characterization as well, but I could very easily picture a little mermaid set in space, or a Hamlet set in space, or...
How so?
Well...
But how would that change them?
It would change them very little.
Why?
You'd have the story of the outsider looking to find exception.
No, you're talking about tropes. You're not talking about characters.
I think that's a big part of characterization, though. I think the story is more important.
You're troping.
I'm just saying that these tropes fit in multiple worlds for a reason.
Yeah, tropes. Exactly. I'm actually with
Savvy on this. But that's not the same thing.
Okay, I'll see the point. Like I will surrender. Because I feel like
feel ganged up on, but
no.
Feel ganged up on your.
I am outvoted here. And this is part of the reason why I love when you two talk, is because you're both very much into the world building, which is something I want to work on myself. But I'm still unconvinced that world building is essential Just storytelling.
I think that you would not be rewriting right now if you had spent more time fleshing out that entire world.
I think
because you would still be fascinated with it and intrigued by the upcoming concepts instead of wanting to go back and fix what you already have.
I agree there. I think you're right there. I think the characterization came into my story as I was writing the characters. It wasn't something planned out. It was sort of like...
Well, there's nothing wrong with that. And characters absolutely should evolve in the stories.
Mm-hmm. I still feel like I've got characters who couldn't really... well, shit. No, I can't say that, because I think they can still exist within other worlds. Their character traits can be applied.
But you're just talking about their, like, this person is outgoing, this person wears hats.
Right.
It's not them.
It's a generalization. It's a generalization of a person. I mean, even if it's not on the scale of even if it's not on the scale of a trope, it's similar. You're zooming out and you're not looking at the person as there, because to look at a person is to see somebody who is a result of, their innate factors, stuff like personality and intelligence and and physiology, but also the outside forces that act upon them, stuff like culture and expectations and upbringing. And so to divorce a character from those outside factors, which we would call the world, perhaps, you're not getting a full picture of them. And while you can kind of take some of their aspects, their innate stuff, and transplant them into another setting, I don't think you can take a full-blown character. Like, imagine if you tried to take Frodo, or any Hobbit, really, and transplant them into a science fiction setting. I mean, you could do it, but to make it make sense, you would have to adapt a lot of the things that hobbits are known for. They're known for their easygoing ways, for living a rural, low-key lifestyle, for living together in these great big sort of familial communities. And that's not, you can't necessarily say those aren't applicable, but you would definitely have to adapt them to a new setting, because those are the cultural factors that shape how hobbits are.
Replace hobbits with Ewoks or Jawas, and you've got where I stand on that. I feel like the setting molds itself to the story.
I don't know that I agree, but I don't have a cogent point to counter that, so I'll just leave it as is.
Well, those are similar, but not the same. They were adjusted for the setting. The setting was not adjusted for the character.
I still think the setting was adjusted to the story. Why Mount Doom and Mordor and that set-off place? Why the adaptation of real-world city names to fit specific languages in sort of this offshoot for the Lord of the Rings? Those were arbitrary, not necessarily arbitrary, tactful choices, but ones made specific to the end goals of the story.
We'd have to ask Tolkien about that, I think.
That's true. But my point is you can take any good story, and I don't mean to make a no true Scotsman's fallacy here, any story really, and adapt it to a specific setting.
I agree.
By molding the setting to fit.
I agree, but you do need to make those changes, because not every story fits in every setting right out of the box.
No. Well, I think those changes occur more to the setting than to the story.
That's because you're basing that argument off of trope stories. So yes, you can take a basic legend, say, The Little Mermaid or Cinderella, and you can change the setting, you can change a lot of the aspects, and as long as you stick with the basic known trope, then yes, it's the same-ish story. But that is tropes. That isn't characterization. That isn't actually a world. The setting isn't becoming part of the story. You're just whoosh.
As a point of contrast to your point, Neko, I will offer up the Expanse series, which has a very specific setting in which a very specific story takes place, and it is the interplay of all of those. Like, I mean, it's a political intrigue slash near science fiction, like near history science fiction.
It's a westernist sci-fi.
Not exactly.
Totally. The Expanse is a westernist sci-fi.
Uprooted.
I don't think so. There's too many political things going on for it to be simply a western. I would say Firefly is a western in space. But
Cowboy.
I would call Firefly a western in space. Honestly, I would call Expanse a little bit closer to Game of Thrones in space. But
I've only read the first book and I haven't seen the show, so
okay,
I'm not
well, first of
familiar.
all, you're wrong for both of those things because they're amazing.
I'm looking forward to reading or listening to more of it and watching the show. Those are on our hit list for sure.
Okay, good. They should be. But my point is, in this case, the story is a direct result of the setting. You put these three powers in a sort of tension, a very Cold War-esque story, or a Cold War-esque situation. This whole setting, and then the story proceeds from that setting in such a way that it makes perfect sense.
Now,
and that's the kind of story that you can't really tell in just any other setting without extreme generalization.
Yeah, but you defeat your own point when you say Cold War-esque as a description of the setting. I feel like
again, that's what I'm talking about. It's an extreme generalization. I'm also trying not to spoil things.
I think you could set the same sort of story within the Cold War. I think you could set the same sort of story within any sort of like general Cold War type scenario standoff.
Yeah, again, I'm talking. You have to do extreme generalizations, though. I mean, there are some specifics to the setting, to the way that the three major parties interact with each other, and then the fourth unknown faction that I will again not spoil, because you should find out for yourself.
If I remember right, they're part of the space station and the exotic materials, right?
I will not spoil anything. So
I need to go back and reread that, re-listen to it.
It's good. It's very good. Highly recommend. But yeah, my point is, all right. Well, let's dodge to another one. Like, let's take, oh gosh, iRobot.
Mine tastes better because it's not as much water.
Let's take iRobot, for example. It's a story about what does it mean to be human at its broadest level, right?
Mm-hmm. Very true.
But that's
like Pinocchio.
Sure, but again, if you zoom in any farther than it's a story about what it means to be human, there are It or Blade Runner or a lot of these other sci-fi things that deal with what does it mean to be a human being are really only fit for their specific settings.
Oh, cool.
Mm-hmm.
Didn't that have like Brad Pitt?
Could you imagine iRobot with a steampunk coat of paint or a magical coat of paint? Same story, beat for beat. Same dialogue, same everything.
No, I could not.
No,
with some minor adaptations, perhaps.
You have to change it. That's the whole disagreement we're having.
How does that change the story? Is my main point.
It depends on what you mean by the story. If you're talking about the broad strokes of the story, like the big picture, it doesn't change much. If you're talking about the specifics, it can change a lot.
Ever After.
So definitely for the specifics. It's
Ever After compared to Cinderella. Same trope storyline. Completely different stories.
Same setting too, though, is the thing. Well, no, not really.
There you go.
It's just where you are in time.
Waha.
I don't know. I'm not
Oh,
I'm not sure what I want to settle on, or what I truly believe here.
I
Whether
think
it's
we can
story or
all agree that both world building and story are needed for a really good story.
very true.
yes.
I think that's something we can all agree to easily.
Yeah, you got to have both. Whether one is more important than the other is something we disagree on.
Hmm.
But I would say you definitely can't ignore either of them to have a good story.
I think story is more structure.
Yep, that's very much true. I can agree with that. I think the structure. Well, yeah. Now that we've come to an agreement, I think we should move on to the next topic or question. So pick your poison.
Skeleton.
Skeleton.
Story is skeleton.
Story.
Everything else is the human.
Neat. Flesh. Oh well.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Is good metaphor. Is good analogy.
It is. Because if you have the skeleton of a rabbit, there's only so many parts you can put on it.
Mm-hmm. It's very true. Because think like Lion King versus Hamlet.
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
All right. Story is skeleton.
Skeleton. Structure.
Settings the flesh. Yeah.
In
And everything
Soviet
else.
Russia, skeleton is story.
Sounds like the opening to a some sort of noir style.
I feel like I should have put more punch in yours.
No,
I'm talking about flavor, not liquor.
yes. All right. So we've got. Well, next topic. Call the shots. Chaos.
All right. My question, the other one I had going was, how often do you find yourself using tropes when building your world or your characters?
Constantly.
Eh.
Like, mostly because TV tropes is a fucking trap.
It is a trap.
It is the rabbit hole to end all rabbit holes.
It's a never-ending loop of tropes and examples and tropes and examples and tropes and examples.
And then you have like it gives
Trope
you examples
talks.
of the tropes, and then tropes related to those examples, and then you go down the rabbit hole some other direction. Yeah, trope talks too. Have you
Trope
seen
talks.
those? Yes. Oh my goodness, I love the dynamic between red and blue.
They're cute.
Red, yeah, red for fiction, and then blue for like history, and both are wonderful narrators and just really good at presenting their stories.
Yep.
Okay. Ali, you take control. So, I think it's our turn for topic, isn't it?
Oh, wait, I didn't get Savvy's answer on that one.
Oh, Savvy.
For what?
I asked, how often do you find yourself using tropes?
I'm a little bit annoying. I like to actively try and subvert tropes, so I keep them in mind to avoid them.
Okay. That makes sense. Do you find yourself trying to subvert all your tropes, or just like some of the really big ones?
I usually like to avoid some of the really big ones, and I don't mind a few of the smaller ones. It really depends on what story I'm telling.
Okay.
So, like, if I'm just improving, then yeah, I will use tropes for sure.
Fair enough.
Mm-hmm.
They're nice, easy shortcuts.
Yeah. Plus, when you flip them on their head, like lampshading them and calling them out on themselves.
That's always fun. Well,
yeah,
it's fun to us. It's fun to us postmodern people. You know, I guess you could say we've seen it all before, and so to see what is old and familiar be called out and flipped on its head is always amusing to us. I don't know that I would say it's amusing to all people, if that makes sense.
That makes sense.
I think that's only if it's obvious.
Could be.
Yeah. I feel like as long as you disguise it well enough, then most people, except for very hardcore content creators, won't really catch it and will just enjoy it for what it is.
That's fair.
I think so. Let me elaborate on the constantly thing, because I think tropes are more an observation than a set of rules. They're just
Yeah.
It's kind of like an ornithological guide, like a book of birds for bird watchers. Like we've seen these in the wild, and they're awesome. Yeah, or like a book of wild herbs and mushrooms. Yeah, a foraging guide.
Mushroom hunting.
This has been out on the wild, or we've seen this out in the wild, and it hasn't been dangerous, or this is like what we've observed.
These are the
with
effects
this
that it's
specific
had
trope.
on most people that have tried it.
Right. They're not. The point I want to drive home here is they're prescriptive, not descriptive.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Like, not prescriptive, like I prescribe this, perceptive. So, well, shoot, now I'm going into like semantics, but it's
I love semantics.
what people. It's
Oh, no.
I think down the rabbit hole we go, because it's not necessarily a prescribed idea. It's an observed
Phenomena.
phenomenon, which can be
Phenomena.
repurposed. Yeah. Well, it's a tool. It's just a model or observation.
Yeah, that makes sense. It also makes sense that as human beings we would find tropes.
Truth.
I mean, we're built for finding patterns even when there are none, which is why you get all those Virgin Marys on a piece of toast.
It's also good for the
True.
brain to re-experience stories that you know.
Interesting.
Especially for people with anxiety disorders or any sort of intrusive thoughts.
Mm-hmm.
It's good to already know the basis of the plot and still go back and re-experience it.
Interesting.
Yeah.
What I wonder is if that's a mix of or if that's specifically because it's a re-observation of the known, or if it's like a remixing or reimagining of the known that provides the comfort. Like where.
Well, it's like it's good to read books that you've already read when you love them, because not only is it comforting, but it also provides reassurance of the
concepts
that you already adore and believe in.
So it's like a
reinforcement. There we go. Reinforcement. There we go.
That's a good one. It's like a reaffirmation of the familiar.
Yes.
Interesting.
Okay.
I don't reread books anymore. Let me just clarify. Okay. Neko can attest to this. I have a near photographic memory, so when I read a book, I remember what's in it.
Did I ever pay you for that Shakespeare quote?
You did.
But,
okay, good. It's true.
Okay, but what I have found...
Even with a photographic memory. So, I'm curious about, when you read a book, do you simply read the words and experience the words, or do you create the world in your brain as you go?
Well, that's a good question.
It's hard to... I guess I would say I probably read them and then create. I read faster than my mind can imagine. So I'll like read a paragraph and then kind of reconstruct it in my head as I go. So I guess I would say a little bit of both, but it doesn't happen at the same time.
Okay. So when you go back and reread a book, how much is there actual comprehensive reading and how much is there just re-experiencing the world that you already acknowledged and built based off of that book?
Right. Is it a reimagining, or is it like a reliving of the initial imagining?
It's really more of the latter.
Okay.
In those times when I do reread, I'm either like, there was a book, one of my favorite books when I was growing up was Starfighters of Adamar. It's a Star Wars book. It's hilarious, and I read it to reinforce just the humor and the characterization that I was enjoying. And I mean, this was as a kid and like a preteen, so I wasn't a critical reader at that point. I was just like, I like this book. It's funny. It makes me laugh. It makes me smile. It's a lot of fun, and I kept rereading it over. As I grew older and started kind of critically evaluating books as I read them, I started to evaluate them a lot more as I went, in addition to experiencing them. So and especially now that I've been trying to write my own, I've been paying attention to sort of um, the meta of the book, not just the story and the characters and what it makes me feel, but
Hmm.
also like the style of the writer. How do they um, how do they work characters together? What's their dialogue look like? How do
The
they
techniques used.
yeah, a lot of the technicalities of it. And it was funny. I was talking to my wife about this, and she asked me, "Does that ruin your experience of the book?" And I said, I mean, and I kind of asked her a counter question. It's like, does being a geologist ruin your experience of viewing mountains just because you know what's in them and how they were formed? And she said, no, I get to appreciate it on a deeper level. And I said, yeah, that's kind of the way it is with me too.
Yeah, it enriches it.
Yeah.
Well, I can see where her question came from, because certainly after understanding a little more creation and world building and etc., watching movies and television shows, I'm a little more hypercritical and less as easily able to just melt into the world and enjoy it as is.
I would agree with that
Fucking
too.
Jonah.
I would,
Fucking Jonah!
Hold on. Stand by. There's one of our, we can hear one of our neighbors through the window.
Sorry, he's very loud.
yeah, I would say that's true too. There was probably a time when I would have watched Star Wars Episode 8 and enjoyed
Oh.
it, um, without thinking too much more of it. But when I did see it, I was old enough that I was not at that point.
Hmm.
So I think granted this is my own perspective on my own criticality, and so it might it might just be a little bit of self-blindness here, but I feel like what it has done is has raised my standards so that
Yep.
I don't enjoy garbage
Mhm.
like I could when I was younger and didn't know, like I guess didn't know better.
Does that spoil your experience of the garbage
Garbage?
though?
Yes. But at the same time, when I find something beautifully made, it
Mm-hmm.
heightens my appreciation for it all the more. Like oh, hi kitty boy. Um when like recently my wife went back, we both went back and we watched Infinity War and Endgame again.
Yep.
And I I I found that in rewatching Infinity War, I found a theme that I hadn't noticed before.
Mm-hmm.
I found the theme of how do you handle the question of, can I sacrifice the person or the people that I love for something bigger,
For the bigger picture. Yeah.
for the bigger picture. And the big difference between Thanos and the rest of the good guys is their answer to that question. Captain America says to Vision, "We don't trade lives." Um,
Mm-hmm.
Tony, oh gosh, not Tony. Doctor Strange initially is like, "I would not hesitate to sacrifice every one of you to save the Time Stone," but then he goes back on that. He changes his mind on that.
For the one over, yeah,
Yeah,
the
I
one
mean we don't
billion,
know it
whatever.
yet, but the fact is, like he treated the person as more important than the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Um, gosh, who else? Wanda, when she has to choose whether to kill Vision and you know kill Vision and save the universe, she has to answer that question too, and it breaks her heart to have to make that choice.
Mm-hmm.
But she does it, and only because he basically begs her to.
Right.
You know,
Which that feeds into his version of that question as well. How much are you
right?
willing to sacrifice? Yeah.
Exactly. But then Thanos flips that all on its head, and it's like he's willing to sacrifice the only person you could say that he loves for the bigger picture. And I mean, like, granted, his goal is a reprehensible one, but he's basically the only one who has to answer that question.
Mm-hmm.
Or
But it's
not who
not
has to answer that question. He's the only one who answers the question in that way of his own free will when it's not the last resort. If Thanos really wanted to, if he really held Gamora higher than his mission, he could still continue on his goal to purge half the universe of life, or to purge the universe of half of its life, the way he did before he knew about the Infinity Stones, planet by planet, doing his thing. That's not the way he wants to do it, but he could do it that way, and he chooses not to. He chooses instead to sacrifice the person he loves.
Is it really sacrifice if it's murder?
And I agree. I
The
agree
real.
with that, and that's the other half of that question, is that Gamora doesn't want to sacrifice herself, and Vision does. Gamora doesn't want it, and Thanos does, and Wanda does not want to do this at all, and Vision says you must. And that's I think the big difference between those two. But the big, that question is sort of like a resonant theme throughout the movie, and I had never caught it before.
So you picked up on that and watched it a second or third time, another time.
Yeah, and
Did that
I
change
hold
the
up.
way you viewed like the story?
No, I held up, I hold up Infinity War as one of the greater modern works of um, movie fiction. I think it's spectacularly done, and I think
Mhm.
there are a lot of layers to it. And when I found that layer, whether intentional or not, but I think it was, when I found that layer, it just made me appreciate everything else so much more.
Okay. So the other layer is there.
Yeah, to me, when I watch that movie, I appreciate the surface level things, the good CGI, the excellent acting, the beautiful score,
Mm-hmm.
the way they somehow managed to perfectly balance like 20 characters screen time in such a way that all the major people got enough screen time, and nobody super important was shunted to the side. Like, I
They
get
they
that.
really, yeah, they fell back on the previous movies a lot for that, but
Yeah,
they
well,
did great there.
but they got to do that because they paid attention to the continuity, because this was all part of an overarching story. So they
I
got that part. They've got the broad theme of, the good versus evil, and the single solitary bad guy basically against
Mhm.
the teamwork of the heroes. But
Yeah,
then you go down another level and you realize that it's constructed as if Thanos is the hero of the movie.
right. For the first one especially, that's like
Yes.
spot on. I've got to wonder what it's like for someone to watch Infinity War, like the first two parts, without having seen any of the other Marvel movies.
I don't know that it works because you've got all of these characters. You get glimpses of how they are, but you don't really know how they get to where they are. So it's kind of like, I would imagine it's very confusing.
Mm-hmm. No
So
doubt, but
you
I'm
are
curious.
right. It is a shortcut, but that's assuming that you take Infinity War and Endgame out of their contexts just because they're 2-hour movies, or I guess really closer to 3-hour movies.
Mhm.
But I mean, that's the thing though, is that the at least phase 1 of the Marvel Cinematic Universe is all one story.
Right, there's like
And
20 something.
right, so you can't take them out of context. You can't remove them all from each other because it's all part of the same story. It would be like trying to say, "Oh, coming in on Return of the King in Lord of the Rings, like these characters that you're meeting, you see them, you get glimpses of who they are and what they're doing and what they're all about, but you don't know how they got there."
Mhm.
And it would be super confusing because you're coming in at the end without any of the previous build up.
So, because I love rabbit holes, that actually reminds me of Chuck Palahniuk's Invisible Monsters, where it's the main story told almost like a magazine. He took chapters and mixed them all up. So you jump through it like a choose your own adventure book, but you can also read it from beginning to end as a different sort of story. Um, it's curious. It makes me wonder about different ways to view the same material based on when you jump in or how you approach it.
That's an interesting point. I don't. I think books are not really a way to do that. I think you could probably get away with that in something like a video game where the flow is a little bit more controlled.
Well, hold on. Have you ever read a choose your own adventure story?
Yes, and it's a clunky way to do it, is my
Right.
point. Like, you can do it in a book, but it's clunky. The choose your own adventure books don't make any sense if you read them front to back.
No, definitely not there. But
So it isn't quite a choose your own adventure book.
yeah,
Not really. It's not describing it very well.
yeah.
It's saying that you can jump around in it
Mhm.
with a fairly guided sense and still have it make sense and still be a good read. There are parts where you can go from chapter 10 to chapter 20 to chapter 30 and they all mesh together well.
Each chapter stands alone,
Interesting.
but the overall whole is a story in its own right.
Okay, so it's kind of like interweaving plot threads.
Yes.
Yes.
Very
Okay.
much so.
I've seen a very limited form of that. I've seen a very limited form of that done with flashbacks in Lies of Locke Lamora, where I don't know how he did it. Scott Lynch pulled off like writing a main story quote in the present, but he actually starts you in the past, and then he basically just fast forwards 25 years or so, and but then he gives you he goes back, and they're labeled, which is part of probably part of why he was able to get away with that. But you're basically going back and seeing relevant parts of the backstory as played out, as if they're not really flashbacks because the characters aren't really remembering back to what's happening. It's not a true flashback. It's just sort of like the author saying, hold on, something important is coming up, and here's the critical backstory that you're going to need to know to really understand it.
So the relevant information.
Right.
Lies of Locke. Okay.
But it's not just, oh, hey, let me intercut here for like a paragraph of, oh, by the way, I totally forgot to, input this earlier. It's like it's almost like it's its own story that flows, but it's flashed back from the current time. And in that thread is always, or in that past thread, I guess I'll call it, is clues or foreshadowing or explanation for why events in the present are important. And it's super well done. And apparently the fourth book is coming out soon. I read through the 3 that exist, and they are all great.
Nice.
So,
I just picked up the first one. You've talked about this before with me too.
I have, because it's so good.
It is no longer on my list. It's now in my queue.
Yes.
I'm gonna listen to it next. So
yeah, you'll enjoy that, and I think it actually would probably be really well rendered in audiobook format.
nice.
All right, so we've done a lot of talking, kind of around my questions. But did you guys have like topics to discuss on for yourselves? And
So we kind of had a mix. We had a series of items. So Savi and I, Savi mispronounced a word, and it set us off on like a random tangent. So from there, we discovered that those little mistakes or those little portmanteau words, that weird mixing can produce specific images or ideas that enrich worlds and world building approaches. So, what to you is an everflower, for example?
Well, given the name, I would assume it is either a flower that never dies, or it is a flower that always stays in bloom.
All right. So for your world specifically, how does that become a reality? How can that be a thing in your world, if possible?
Well, a flower that never dies would, by definition, and granted this is me thinking scientifically, would basically have to become almost, first it would have to be a perennial, and second it would almost end up becoming like a woody plant, almost like a tree.
Mm-hmm.
So And I mean, there are flowering trees, so that's not outside of the question. Um, but as far as a flower always staying in bloom, that just actually doesn't make any scientific sense. Because the point of a flower is to pollinate and then turn into a fruit. So,
You're going you're going way more general though. Like, what about a flower that lived forever? Like just that individual flower, or something along those lines. Like, you what would someone call an everflower? Maybe a flower that stays in bloom longer into winter within your world, or like see what I'm saying? Like it
yeah,
already gets thoughts moving. It creates like an analysis of either the world or um, the items and approaches within that world.
interesting.
So, like, could you imagine an everflower within? Um,
It would probably end up being sort of a legendary or mythical thing. Kind of like, I guess I kind of picture the sunlight flower from Tangled, the one that's like if you find it and you whisper magic words to it, it restores your youth or something like that.
mhm.
Or if you brew it into tea, you save the life of your wife and grant your daughter magical powers, right? Like to me it would be something mythical and legendary on that sort of par. The sort of thing that you know, quests would be created to try and find this, kind of on a par with the Holy Grail
Yep.
in Arthurian legend. That's what I think of when I think of an Everflower, but I'm not saying that's by any stretch the only way to do it.
No, that's awesome. That's multiple ways. Like that's the whole point is the fact that you can go down the rabbit hole with any of those specific ideas and make them um, maybe not a central figure within a story, but an embellishing element. Or hell, maybe they could reveal a central theme to a specific story or a specific idea. Know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, and this kind of reminds me of how we came up with the pantheons for the different gods as well. It's the mixing of ideas is what creates creative intention or creative thought.
I think it's kind of a broader application of the general truism that it is constraints that produce creativity.
Mm-hmm.
If you have to mix ideas, if you have to say this idea has to relate to this idea, how do they relate? That automatically puts a constraint on you, while at the same time giving you the benefit of connecting to ideas.
So what is
That's actually really clever. I like it.
yeah? So what is this? So long as this fits within.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah,
So
that's
that was one
interesting.
of there was that was one of the words that we came up with. We've let's see. I think I had the other one written down. There were another few. Um, I came up with fangarang as one of the mixes.
Fangarang?
Yeah, so immediately think. I don't know. For me, it's like hook and bangarang mixed with like
Yeah.
it. It
I'm
calls to mind specific aspects, but
I'm thinking of it would be the name of a weapon, like a boomerang or maybe a kukri or some kind of bent boomerang type weapon made from the fang of a legendary creature.
mhm.
Like it's fangarang
So like just like a two teeth in a boomerang formation. You throw the fangarang.
and it comes back.
Nice. See, very simple, very basic idea from just like a mess up of mine, but one that's been stuck in my head for the last minute.
That's hilarious. Fangarang. I love it.
I keep wanting. So it's what's her name? Zephyr's boomerang thing. I keep wanting to call it that.
Oh, do it. Have her call it that. People give names to their shit all the time. I mean, they name their cars for heaven's sakes.
Yeah, that's true. Or
People people have
what's
this
the name of
really
your Roomba?
bizarre tendency to anthropomorphize things and give them names.
Yeah.
I've noticed this. Where are you? Doggone it. Where did it go? No. Where are you? Oh, there it is. The story generator. This kind of reminds me of your idea.
The mixing of elements, yeah.
Yeah. I showed this to you, right?
Yep, you shared it with me, and I messed with it for a bit, like jumped through the different random generations. It's pretty fun.
Did you find anything that stuck out to you?
I wasn't specifically looking. I just really wanted to try and understand how it worked. So I didn't like use it. I more like tooled with it, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. That's fine.
But the idea of a gunslinger who wants to protect a road, but the person they most, that initial story, like going through it, is awesome. I love those sort of tools because they make you look at things that you're familiar with in a new way.
Yeah. And I mean it's kind of that not two words mashed up, but like five or six concepts mashed up
Mm-hmm.
all together and connected. And that kind of reminded me of what you were talking about.
Mm-hmm. This is why Brandon Sanderson is so amazing.
Brando Sando is pretty great. Okay.
So on the idea of the Everflower, I don't know if you want to like write down your idea of what an Everflower is, or like summarize the conversation there, but you see how much like value can come from those sort of re-examinations of, mixed ideas.
Yep.
That was actually Savvy's question. I haven't come up with one specifically out. My goal was to try and like take that one and run with it. But let's see.
You can count that as his. That's fine.
Do you have another?
I have a couple, yeah.
Oh, well, let me give that to him, as you so generously said, and let's get yours down.
Thank you, love.
Oh boy.
No pressure.
So wait, is that your definition of an Everflower?
Yeah, that's me. Sorry,
Okay.
I should put my...
What kind of flower is it?
And we didn't even get to talk about our versions of the definition either, because Savvy and I both came up with different versions, but like mixed within the same world, and it really worked out.
For me, it looks like kind of... I think I would say it looks like a white and gold Easter lily.
Okay.
That's lovely. Oh, yeah, okay. So like a stargazer.
What magical properties?
I haven't decided yet. I mean, the idea of an Everflower kind of suggests the idea of, like eternal youth or eternal life, kind of a thing.
Mm-hmm. I can see that. So the whole backstory of this idea is it's more about spontaneous creation.
Yeah.
So improving. And you get a prompt like Everflower, and then you just run with it. You tell me as much as you possibly can about this one thing and what it means and what it is to you.
Interesting.
Yeah.
How do you come up with your like word mixes? Do you like roll a die, or do you construct a list and just kind of randomly pick two, or do you just have them sort of come to you? What do you do?
I think it's best done with a group of people because it can be any, mix of things. It can be you roll a die and you combine two words, but mostly it's somebody else suggests a prompt and you run off of that. This one was actually, I misspoke. It's elderflower, and it's a liquor that we were drinking.
Ah. Sometimes minor mistakes can lead to some really great stuff.
Yeah, it was pretty cool. I actually really liked what I came up with for it.
Yeah. What'd you come up with?
It's a crystallized fungus, actually.
Ooh.
Yeah. That grows deep in mountainsides, and it looks sort of similar to a flower, the way the crystals appear above ground, which is why people call it an everflower.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
Very neat.
Yeah, it
Crystallized
was fun to
fungus.
run with.
Crystallized fungus makes me think of Tiberium.
Ha! Siberia? Or wait,
Type-
wait, I'm sorry.
Tiberium, the mythical element from the Command and Conquer series.
Oh,
I don't know what
jeez.
that is.
What was it? Red Sun or Rising Sun or something like that?
Tiberian Sun.
Tiberian Sun. Yes. Yes.
Such a good game. Loved
I
that.
have no idea what that is.
Think StarCraft,
Okay.
Kind
but
of.
with like modern weapons. But if every conspiracy that ever existed was true,
Kind of, yeah. That's close.
so like mix Fallout with Call of Duty, and you're not too far off theme wise.
But it's a strategy game, so
Yeah, yeah.
anyway, it's a crystal that harvests metals and rare elements from the ground and grows out of these little pods that almost like it basically acts kind of like a fungus that grows crystals instead of fruiting bodies.
Cool.
Yeah. And of course the crystals, it also releases spores that can infect humans and cause all kinds of horrible mutations and stuff.
Suddenly mutants and dog meat, and off we go. Yes.
Yeah. So you say crystallized fungus, and my head immediately jumps to Tiberium.
Interesting.
Okay, I see. I see.
I
the train
wasn't
of thought
aware
now.
of that reference.
And I'm pretty
Yeah.
sure Tiberium was basically invented as an excuse for a game mechanic. It's like if we want one thing to be harvested, we only want to have one resource for simplicity. How do we make that make sense in a sci-fi setting? And I'm pretty sure that's how they came up with that. I don't know that for sure, but to me that whole idea just kind of speaks of sort of a reverse engineering of we have an idea for a game mechanic, now how do we explain it in the universe of the game?
That makes sense for it. Like, don't gather wood, don't gather iron, don't gather.
Yeah, you gather
Great
one
resources.
crystal that has gathered everything already for you.
And then zombies. But that's several. Yeah.
That's only in Tiberian Sun and later. I actually don't think I don't know. I don't remember if Tiberium actually damages infantry units in the first game. It's been a very
The
long
first
time.
game, I think the first game had like sort of a Middle Eastern, like technicals and guerrillas style for one of the factions.
The first game was basically 5 minutes in the future in terms of tech levels.
Yeah,
Mad Max 1.
also true. Mad Max
A
1.
little, yeah. Except substitute desert sand for Tiberium wasteland.
Yeah.
What sand?
All right, and if I remember
I
right,
don't like sand. It's coarse and rough and irritating, and it gets
it
everywhere.
gets everywhere. Very true. Oh jeez.
So what was your Crimson? What was your idea of the Everflower?
If I remember right, it was literally just a blossom floating in air, like circulating, or maybe this is a new imagining of it. Because
Doesn't matter.
we both talked through the idea into the crystallized fungus growing deep within the earth that's eternal and can give life, depending on like what parts you cook.
It doesn't give life.
Like I think I remember us talking about the roots being something.
The mycelium is the most important part.
Yeah,
It's the most potent.
the life giving element.
It doesn't give life. It can revive someone mostly dead.
Only mostly.
It can regrow limbs.
There's a
Heal
big
most
difference between mostly dead and all dead.
There absolutely is. And it cannot fix someone who is all dead.
Yeah, all dead. Well, there's only one thing you can do then. Go through their pockets and look for loose change.
Oh yes.
I love that movie.
Yeah, that movie
is absolutely fantastic. And guess what there's a lot of in that movie? World building.
The book holds up too.
Yeah, because
I've
world
not read the book.
building. Oh, it's very good.
And you can
It
find
will
it for free.
it will hit you so much harder than the movie, though.
It's a short read too. That's the beautiful thing. Is it's like you can bang it out and
Big warning.
the feels.
Big warning.
Many feels? Much feels?
Yeah. So
Many
hard.
much feels?
Yep. Maximum feels.
Okay, well, I have been duly
Maybe
warned.
not maximum,
If you love the movie, then yes,
I do
maximum
love the
feels.
movie.
but very close to maximum.
Maximum feels.
I watched the movie so many times as a child that I can essentially watch it back in my brain anytime I want.
That's pretty wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's why I haven't watched it in years. Not like on a screen.
So, question:
I have.
Could the Dread Pirate Roberts exist in any other world than within the world?
It depends. If you're talking about just a Dread Pirate, because the Dread Pirate Roberts, at least in the movie, I don't know how it is in the book, but in the movie he's a very vague character on purpose.
Right.
The movie's a very good
He's
adaptation.
mythical.
Yeah.
In that very world, he's a myth.
Mhm.
Right. So if you're talking about, is there a mythical pirate so fearsome and so deadly that everyone fears the mere name, then yes, that part could exist anywhere. I mean, we had it in our real world because I'm fairly certain Dread Pirate
Blackbeard.
Roberts' mythos was sort of based on Blackbeard, wasn't it?
One of the most prolific and amazing pirates ever was a woman, not Blackbeard.
That's true.
Very much. And Bonnie, yes. But Blackbeard is the go-to. And anybody who expects someone to be, I don't know, like
Somebody's got to fix that.
terrifying. Well, and Bonnie was wonderful in her own right too. Shoot, what was it? There was a Chinese pirate actually.
Yes,
Who
yes,
had-
there was.
Yeah, she basically brought the Chinese government to its knees and then retired peacefully
Mm-hmm. And died of old age.
Like,
Pretty impressive
shoot.
stuff.
What was her name? Like Xianxi or something like that. It was so cool. Qingxi.
Mhm.
Qingxi. At least I think that's how it's pronounced. I'm not
Is it
sure. But
Qingsh or Qingxi?
Ching.
yeah, so Ching for the last bit.
Ching. Ching?
Yeah. So Qingxi. At least I think. I don't know. We need Filthy here. He speaks Chinese. Crazy. What was it? Yeah. Yeah, but her whole story is fucking amazing.
Truth.
But we don't know about that because our myths are different than our histories, aren't they?
A little bit.
British Empire,
Like,
Portuguese, and Qing Dynasty.
When you think myth or legend or fairy tale, do you jump to Monkey King and Journey to the West, or do you go immediately to Little Red Riding Hood? And
it depends. It depends because I think of those as three different things: a myth, a legend, and a fairy tale.
Mhm.
I think those are three different things. Like for me, a myth is usually rooted in Greek.
No.
Greek and Roman mythology. A legend, I feel, is like a little bit more tame and a tad more closer to home. I think of stuff like the tall tales from the American pioneer
Pecos
stories.
Bill. Yeah.
Pecos Bill, Paul Bunyan, Johnny Appleseed. I think of those as more like legends.
John Henry.
Yes, John Henry. What a baller.
Mm-hmm.
But, and then I think of fairy tales as more like along the lines of the Grimm stuff.
Okay.
Mythos encompasses more than just Greek and Roman mythology.
I understand that. I'm talking about myth. Like when somebody says myth, that's what I think of.
You jump there and not to Loki versus Thor, or what's it, Thor's Wedding, or things along those lines, those specific.
No, I don't. I don't jump to those.
Or what's her name?
Norse mythology.
Yeah, Norse mythology or Egyptian mythology, or what's her name? One of the two creator gods in Japanese mythology. Goes down to the underworld.
Gosh, I'm totally blanking. I think I know who you're talking about.
Yeah, the kind of stuff that overly sarcastic talks about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. There are specific myths that are called to mind before the general, Well, do those fall under the umbrella of myth?
I would say so. Absolutely. I'm just saying, for me, when somebody says myth, I think of stuff like the Greek mythology, stuff that's long ago, so long ago that there's not any verifiable element of truth to it, at least not any like verifiable element of, I guess I would say, reality to it.
Hmm.
Like, I mean, JBP would argue that, truth is a different matter, and I might agree with him on that, um, but yeah, like a myth is something that's so fantastical, so long ago, so far removed that there's basically no reality left in it. That's kind of what I think of when I hear myth. A legend I think of as more along the lines of it's an exaggerated tale of somebody who actually existed.
Those seem like
Hmm.
fuzzy zones with along a spectrum.
I agree. It's kind of a reality to um, not abstractness. What's the word I'm looking for? I don't want to use
Surreal,
mythology in its own definition, but like,
fictitious.
yeah, there. Thank you. Fictitiousness.
Yeah, so it's fictiveness or fictivity, like
Well, what
fictitious.
would you classify Johnny Appleseed?
Oh, he was a real guy.
Right, so he would
Well,
be a legend, the
Yes,
legend of Johnny Appleseed.
exactly.
was
I
he
would call
really?
him a legend.
Was there a real Johnny Appleseed
There
though?
was.
Oh shit!
Yeah,
Yeah.
that. See, I would call that folklore.
Hmm.
So Robin Hood, was there a real Robin Hood? Where's
Yeah.
that fall in?
There was a real guy by the name of Robin. Did he do all the things that Robin Hood is purported to have done? No. So I would call that a legend.
Well, surely there was a Robin somewhere in history who called the locksmith.
Robin of Locksley. No, he liked raw salmon on his bagels.
Ew.
Yikes! Oh, there's a classic too, though. But you see what I'm saying? Like, there are points along the range of reality and fiction. What is the difference between? Where's the delineating factor here between a myth and a legend?
I would say that myth has no real basis, but aside from maybe symbology. Like, you could argue that, like, for example, Noah's flood could be considered a myth because beyond the fact that every culture has some idea of a flood, like, or covering at least the local area, if not the whole world. Aside from that, like, symbology, there's not really any real basis in reality for it.
Yeah, no
So,
specific global event.
right. Whereas, like, King Arthur, I would call a legend rather than a myth because there was a guy, Uther Pendragon, who was a king of England, um, and I believe fought the Romans or was the son of. I can't remember all of it, but there were real elements that are incorporated and exaggerated and told and retold, and like more and more it's added over time. But if there's
Mhm.
any real element to it that can be like verified, I would say that makes it into a legend rather than a myth.
Okay, so it's a matter of how much of it can be verified as realistic to be a legend.
Yeah,
So Elvis was a legend, for example.
I would say Elvis was a real person. Like, the problem is when you start getting into the modern age, everything is so verifiable that it's hard to hard to really establish what we might call a legend.
I don't know, man. Elvis lives. He's out there. It's very true. I saw it online.
Okay, so the maybe we say something like the legend of Elvis's death, or purported death or whatever. I mean,
His
maybe.
continued existence, or something along those lines.
I don't know. Maybe in 100 years, Elvis will be like legendary in the same way that like Paul Bunyan is for us now.
Maybe.
So, what are
Ooh,
cryptids?
Well,
well,
that's a contentious subject.
now we're going into new territory. Yeah. Okay. I like
uh,
where this is headed.
there are. I would say if you had to put them on the spectrum of real to fictitious, I would put them in the status of myth. But it's also that's also a little bit of a fuzzy line because a lot of times the cryptids are based on real animals.
Experiences.
Yeah. Real
Whether
but
or not it was what
misunderstood.
they actually think it is, but it was
Right.
a real experience.
It was
Right.
a screaming bobcat compared to a
Compared to a chupacabra. Or actually no, I think
chupa
the
baby.
chupacabra,
Jersey Devil would be better
the chupa thingy.
to compare to
The
a
chupa
screaming
thing.
bobcat.
We're riding the chupa thing into battle. Yeah,
Sir, it's called a warthog. Didn't I tell you to stop making up animals?
exactly.
Um,
Oh shoot, we need to watch that.
What is that?
Red versus blue.
blue.
So
Are those the shapes?
we've started what? We've started watching Ruby not too long ago.
Oh yeah.
Oh no, that was from Foster's Home for Imaginary Friends.
Yeah, and then
Red and blue.
red was the oh shoot,
That's
whoa.
right. Blue
Yeah.
regard. Blue. What was it? Blue regard.
Blue
R.
regard.
Was it R?
God damn it. That was one of the best opening sequences of any show I've ever seen.
I honestly did not like the opening sequence, but I loved the show. The show was awesome.
Really?
Yeah.
Man, I thought the show was awesome as well, but the opening sequence was one of my favorite things about it because it started slow and then like down the roller coaster you go. Like, and the music was catchy as fuck. I don't know.
I didn't like the music, but that's my personal taste, and I can see what you're saying. Like the
I
slow
like
start
the
into
artwork.
the slow start. Everything looks normal, and then we dive right into the world of the zany. It is very in line with the show for sure.
Yeah. Suddenly we're in like Take on Me, and then into fucking I don't know.
Yeah.
Blue regard Q kazoo.
There it is. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So red versus blue, but blue is not blue regard. Blue is
A faction.
church on blue.
Yes.
Church, Caboose.
Tucker.
No, Caboose. Tucker. That's right. Church, Caboose, and Tucker versus
Sarge, Griff, Simmons, and Lopez.
yes.
Initially.
No, I don't know if Lopez counts.
He would be very offended by you saying that.
It's not like I could understand what he was saying. I could not
They give
understand
him
his-
subtitles.
Yeah, all right. If Lopez counts, then Captain Flowers counts.
Ooh, and so does Sheila.
Sheila counts for everything.
Sheila's amazing. Yeah, I love that show.
I need to go back. Apparently it's still going.
Really? Still? How?
I don't know, through some sort of black magic.
God,
Survived.
it's like supernatural. It just refuses to die.
Yeah, it's like Supernatural. It is one of those forever shows. The Simpsons.
Yeah. Grey's Anatomy.
Is that still going?
Yeah,
Jesus.
I think either that or its last season was this past year. I don't
know.
remember. But
I
because
think-
I
I think
don't
we
watch
can-
it, Julia does.
I think we can safely call the definition, or at least the different fuzzy zones between myth, legend, and history. Or no, what was the third one?
Well, fairy tale I would place firmly in the fictional category. Honestly, I think it's a lot closer to myth than anything else. But I think, unlike myth, it does not have the broad symbolic meanings behind it. That's, I think, the big difference that I would draw between myth and fairy tale.
What?
A symbolic meaning?
I'm talking about
not sure.
broad. I'm talking about broad symbolic meaning. I'm not saying that they're not symbolic. I'm saying that I'm talking archetypal type symbolism.
I have absolutely no idea what you mean. Fairy tales are much more geared towards symbology than myths are. Myths are usually haberdashery to understand the world around them as they knew it.
Right. It's a symbol. The myth is a symbol to understand
not
the broad
really.
world around them, not fairy tales which are symbols of morality or of, let's say, good ideas. Like don't
Don't go into the woods.
Yeah, don't go into the woods. Exactly.
Right, which is a symbol of, hey, don't wander off, it's dangerous.
Sure.
Which is much more of a symbol than Zeus fucked a bull because he was super horny. Like,
I think
and now you have a minotaur.
well, okay, if you're looking at the specifics, sure, but I mean, if we're talking about stuff like um, Uranus and Gaia coming together to create the gods, and the gods are broad symbols of concepts, you know.
Well, obviously, if you're going to use creation myths, then yes, that
Well,
falls
that's kind of what I'm talking about, yeah.
That's cheating. You're literally talking about creation myths. It says creation in the word. Not all mythology is a creation myth.
Could you have a creation myth as a fairy tale?
I feel like fairy tale is maybe a subcategory of myth that's specifically for a morality, like to get across a morality or a morale that you're looking to instill in the listener.
I don't know, man. It's kind of hard to see some of the lessons in the old fairy tales.
Like what?
Because they go either way on some specific moral issues.
Well, like, give me an example.
A lot of fairy tales are about surroundings.
Uh-huh. Well, let's look at the different versions of Little Red Riding Hood.
Sure.
To go specifically, like either she relies on the woodsman to escape, or she relies on her own canny and well-being, like knowledge to escape, or she relies on the washerwomen for a different version. It's
things like that.
Those are different messages and different lessons within the same legend, myth, and fairy tale, in my opinion. I think there's enough overlap between the bunch that there's no real distinction.
I still maintain that the difference between the myth and the fairy tale versus the legend is the line of any verifiable reality underlying the story. That's my line.
That's so very subjective.
Yeah.
What do you mean?
It's very much on what you believe there.
Right. So I mean,
that's why I'm saying verifiable reality. I'm not talking about subjective belief. I'm talking about verifiable reality. Like if there was
reality is only so verifiable.
Well,
let's go there.
Okay, but that means that until further proven, something that is mythological isn't a legend unless you do in fact find some evidence that it did actually happen.
I'm more talking about your distinction between fairy tales and myths.
I'm actually going to continue with my fairy tales are a subset of myths.
Okay.
That to me makes the most sense.
I suppose.
Subset. Okay, subset puts it
within the category of mythology.
Yeah. So what defines the subset?
One is larger than the other.
No. This specific subset. I'm saying, what is a fairy tale? Jeez. Like, we know that it's mythic or mythological, or included in what can be claimed to be fictive. But what determines whether it's a fairy tale or a myth?
I might have to take the Scalia pornography way out and say I couldn't tell you what it is, but I know it when I see it.
Yep. Yeah.
I guess I would say that a fairy tale is a specific kind of myth that you could at the end say the moral of the story is, and lay it out.
Now, hold on though. There are different versions of the same fairy tale that have different morals.
But that doesn't matter. The point is because you're telling a different story. You're telling a different story. If you're telling the story in which, say, Red Riding Hood relies on the woodsman, the moral of the story is don't go into the woods, and if you do, bring a big strong man with an axe with you.
Yeah.
Okay. But if you're telling the version of the story where she relies on her own wits, it would be don't go into the woods unless you're smarter than everyone around you, and even then, it may not be a great idea.
Still a bad idea. Your grandma dies.
Exactly. So I mean, like that's two different morals for two different stories.
Right.
Even though the broad strokes of the fairy tale are the same, the changes change the morale.
This is important, though. Can you have a myth that has a moral that is not a fairy tale?
Yes, I can think of one, but it's not really a codified moral, I guess. I would say just more of a general warning. I would say that um gosh, what was his name? The tales of Tantalus and Sisyphus and gosh, who was the other one?
So Tantalus was the one that could not. What was it? Was constantly drowning, but was constantly starving and constantly thirsting. No matter
Yes.
how high up he reached, he could not reach the fruits above him. And no matter how he stooped or dug, he could not get the water below him.
Correct.
Sisyphus was pushing the boulder, right?
Yes, that's correct. Prometheus.
Prometheus
was the other one that I was thinking of. The one
The
chained
eagle
to the
liver.
rock where the eagle eats his liver every day and then it grows
What about
back.
Ariadne?
Yeah, but those have specific morals. Are they fairy tales or not? And Ariadne is a good one too.
Yeah,
Mhm.
Ariadne. Basically, honestly, you could look at a large part of the Greek mythology and you could just say the moral of the story is don't piss off the gods.
Which, hey, you can look at a lot of fairy tales and think the same thing.
Don't piss off the Fae.
Yeah.
Yeah, fair point.
I'm trying to find the specific distinction between the two categories here.
I would also still like to add in folklore, which is very important, and where do cryptids fall into all of this? Because,
I think they could fall in anywhere, really.
I personally think
fairy-tale-based.
I personally think they belong in myth because there's not really a morale to. Although no, that's not true because the stories of the Wendigos was to warn against the dangers of cannibalism.
there's quite a few
and greed, specifically.
cryptids that have moral warnings.
Yeah. I feel like there's a significant enough portion of overlap that it's indistinguishable between what is mythic and what is a fairy tale, or what is legendary.
I still hold legend. Legend has some fact to it.
I'm willing to surrender that. I think legend has some specific cases where maybe not this person existed, or maybe not, because there are characters from history who have been turned into deities, or deities who have been turned into historic figures.
Well, right. I would look at Buddha, and I would call him a legend because there was a Buddha who was a real person. But did he do all of the things that are ascribed to him? I don't think so.
Okay.
So that's where I would put that legend category, where there is reality to it. The person upon whom the legend is based existed, but did they do all the things that the legends say they did? No. John Henry beat, was a real guy and he beat a steam engine in a contest. But was he actually born with a hammer in his hand? Probably not.
I mean, that would have sucked coming out.
Right.
But
I would say mythology is based on religious backgrounds.
Some people view legends as history, is where I was going to go. So I think both are. That's a good angle as well. Mythology is based off religious backgrounds. What was once a firmly held belief became.
But then what's the difference between that and the fairy tales with morality lessons?
Because morality is not religion. Two,
but morality is often based on religion. And comes from religion.
No.
Often. Not always, but often.
In one case.
Often is true.
How so?
Excuse me.
Morality in general is not based on religion.
No, morality is based off of what is. Well, shit. Now we're getting into complicated stuff. Lord. Sorry. Morality is based off of the moral sense. Sorry, did I interrupt?
Mm-mm.
And I would argue that the moral sense is, in many cases, or at least certainly used to be, largely shaped by religion.
Okay, but the difference between fairy tales and myths are the moral isn't from some sort of religious ideology. It's from, if you stay up too late, the fairies will come and spirit you away and replace you with a changeling. Or if you disrespect your parents, it's very based on scaring children.
I can think of many immoral fairy tales.
Well,
Right.
I look at that and I say, what really is the difference between scaring your children with a story about, if you disrespect your parents, such and such creature will come and eat you, versus, say, a religious commandment saying you shall respect your parents? Like, what's
Or
the
they'll
real
stun you.
difference? Like, the difference is, in one
There are
case, you ascribe
overlapping
the punishment to a mythological being, or sorry, let's stay out of that. Let's stay out of the definition territory. You
Yeah, we're
ascribe
getting
one to a fictitious being, and the other you ascribe it to a different fictitious being who is like, what's the difference? The difference is
less
one
fictitious,
is
more
one is a
fictitious.
fae and one is a god, but the punishment is for the same crime. What's the real difference then?
So there may be overlapping things in those. What's wrong?
Let's try.
Right. There may be overlapping things in those, but in general, religion and mythology is focused on the gods, right? So if you do
Not
these
necessarily.
things according to these gods,
No,
Not necessarily. If you look at Shinto, there's not much in the actually no, not even
divine
Shinto.
spirits.
Look at Buddhism. Buddhism is less about the gods and more about humanity's interaction with the universe.
Would you view the divine spirit and unity found within Nirvana as some sort of all-powerful, all-seeing type of divinity? Like that?
Well,
Now we're getting into that's semantics, though. It's
it is
whether something's
semantics.
a god or a personification through. Like, can you have gods that are not necessarily personifications? Gods that are distinctly inhuman?
I don't know. See, that's the thing. For me,
Buddhism has deities.
well, coming
Throw
from
that out there.
coming from the Christian persuasion as I do, I'm of the opinion that a god or a deity by necessity has to have a personal element, or else you might call it something like an ideal or a concept rather than a god. But
That's fair.
that's not to say, like, again, that's my view of it based on what I think in my thinking structure, and I'm not sure that everybody would say the same thing.
Would you say that there is? Well, okay. So we've kind of gone down the rabbit hole
I love rabbit holes, though.
of yes of definitions, like trying to define different things.
Gosh, I love
So now we're getting
definitions.
into religion versus legend specifically, or
Fairy tale.
in general.
Buddhism has deities.
It
For
does,
one.
yeah.
Myth is more focused on deityism, which is why you automatically think of
Legend specifically. Well, yeah, myth especially. Yeah, like we're. See, yeah, this is not on the topic of writing though. Now we're getting into.
How is this not on the topic of writing?
Well,
do you not use any myths, legends, fairy tales, or folklore in your writing?
Very much so, yeah.
Well, then it is absolutely the topic of writing.
Okay, all right.
Sorry, I'm just taking notes.
Mm-hmm.
Man, quite the rabbit hole here.
Yeah, we're coming up on the end of 2 hours as well. We got it's 8:47 now. I don't know how you're doing on your end, but I'm feeling pretty zombie mode.
Yeah, I could keep going, but if you guys want to set the hard limit at 2 hours, we can do that.
Well, I'd be happy to come back in a minute, but
you just want to go smoke.
I do want to go smoke. I want to go on the
Neko, stop smoking.
He's not gonna.
I want to.
Come on.
Giving
man.
up.
All right. Oh shit.
You can be better. You can beat this. Do it for all the millions of viewers watching our stream.
Yeah, maybe over time. think about it. This stuff's going to be up forever, right? The internet doesn't die. So someone somewhere in the year 3000, assuming the world survives, is looking back through the archives of the way, 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 way back machine, looking at the stream, going, "Holy shit, they're talking about me. This is some sort of like myth."
I was
Why would that be a myth? If we were talking about them and their specific person, that would be a legend.
and I was gonna say
Well,
if this
I made it
is
up.
yeah if this is a real recording, then obviously the three of us existed at some point. Therefore, we are legend.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
As are they, because they would be experiencing it as an actual
Existing
entity.
within like this figurative reality. Okay.
Right. So they would also be a legend.
The man, the legend,
Why man?
the human,
it's part
the
of the
legend.
saying. But yeah,
The cat,
thing,
the legend.
the
The thing,
legend.
the legend. God damn it. The thing, the
well,
legend.
if you can find another easily usable word that has the same starting letter as woman, then we can go with that.
I think being's a good one because it has that suggestion of yes, I am as like the definition of what is conscious. So being is good.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Why does it need to start with a W?
Oh, because it's man, myth, legend.
Oh, fair.
So it would be like, woman,
Matriarch,
wildling,
myth,
woman,
legend.
wildling, legend, something like that.
The matriarch, the myth, the legend.
There you go. See.
Hera.
Just so you say louder.
Oh man. I'm sorry.
So you only have one topic up. What's your next one?
What are you talking about?
He listed 2 topics. You have one.
You gave me the fair. Okay.
What's your next
All
topic?
right, next topic.
Yeah, come up with something. That'll give you something to do.
So we talked about the overlap of ideas and concepts. Savvy knows that I'm fiending right now, so she's pointing me in directions. Overlapping ideas and concepts to create new ideas and concepts.
Okay.
How do those initial ideas and concepts come into existence within someone's mind?
For me, I can. Oh yeah. So let's actually write that down. Whoops. I swear I hit the. There we go. How do you come up with concepts to mix together? I definitely have to randomize.
Yeah, but you randomize from elements that you already understand, no?
I guess.
So those initial elements, those ones that you fundamentally understand, where do those come from?
I'm not following. My brain is breaking.
Well, I'm thinking creativity comes from the mixing of ideas to create new, non-existent ideas. Ideas come from the mixing of experiences, I would believe, to create known words or known concepts.
Okay.
So ground, for instance, it's hard, it's generally what gravity points towards.
Yeah.
Things along those lines. Like I say ground, and you've got a good idea of what a ground is.
Okay.
But as soon as I say groundwork, off into an entirely different, though similarly based concept, right?
Yes.
Because of the mixing of work and ground as a noun and a concept.
Yeah.
To create that new thing. Take like groundwork mythology or the groundwork surrounding mythology, and you're on to more complicated. See where the combination creates complexity there?
Yeah.
All right. So the experiential is the basis for those words. And those words are the basis for randomization and creativity. I think there is a creative element to acquiring those words or those experiences, or at least understanding them in depth. But understand the mechanics or the nature of that nearly as well as I could say mixing earth and worm to create an image or an idea.
Yeah. And I mean, there is a difference between mixing unheard of concepts and, putting together compound words. But I think I understand what you're saying, which is how do you understand things that have no prior basis, but are a mix of concepts that you do understand.
Right. I think the experiential is key to the whole.
I don't know. I mean, if we're going to go back to your previous example, Everflower, it's like you have to have an understanding of a flower and ever and
Right.
what those two things mean, but then whatever an Everflower is something that doesn't yet exist, there's no experience to it necessarily. It's just what I don't know. Like,
Well, what is a flower and what is ever? You've got experiences for both of those portions of it.
right. But I mean,
And it's the combination.
you can see that our answers for what is an Everflower are very, very different.
Mm-hmm. We've got specific concepts that we applied to them, like the idea of mind being this just like floating thing, and then a deep and eternal thing, and then also one that never leaves bloom, like the different ways that we looked at it. I think we brought some of ourselves to that. There was a degree of the self in the experiential for what defines an ever flower.
Yeah, we view or we create through the lens of who and what we are, which is why the creative process is, I would say, so revered, because it is a very, what's the word I'm looking for? A very unique expression of the self.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's well, it seems almost selfish, but it also makes sense logically. I'm not sure where I'm going with this, but we've gone into some really like deep territory, and I'm kind of scared. I don't know. I'm sorry, dude. I'm starting to wind down.
It's okay. We're coming up on our 2-hour time limit as it is, so.
Yeah.
Oy vey, what a time.
Seriously, what a time to be alive.
The internet is a wonderful thing.
That's true. There's been some like really awesome stuff up in. Have you tried? Okay, hold on. Have you tried Eve Echoes yet?
What?
Did you try Eve?
No, and I'm not going to.
It is a trap. Don't do it.
Thank you. I'll remember that. I wasn't going to, but yeah, Azure Lane has claimed my time, my wallet, and my heart. So yeah,
Nice.
I don't have room for another in a now full of work schedule.
Mm-hmm. Well, that's a good problem to have.
Yeah, I've really wanted to do more of the writing, more of the more of this kind of stuff, more streaming, but I get home from work and I'm tired, and I want to shower and do nothing and then go to bed.
Definitely. Feel that.
And I have a partner in crime in that she wants to go to bed early too. So,
What about doing it in the morning?
given that I wake up at 7 so that I can leave the house at 7:15 to go to my job, that's not really a possibility.
Doing it on the road, on the way to your job, or before you get up. Like, no, that doesn't make sense. While you're getting up, excuse me, before you've got your coffee, before you're fully up, just after you wake up, jotting a few things.
Oh, okay, I see what you're saying.
Yeah.
I do think about I mean my job is all manual labor at this point, so I do have time to think about stuff while I'm driving and then while I'm working. So I've actually I actually have a couple of things I wanted to run by you guys. With regards to, where are you? Oh, it's my through lines. Hold on, I gotta switch over to a different window. One moment. Okay. So in book 11, I've decided that one of the big, basically the big conflict of the book is that the big bad guy demands that the main character from books 3, 4, and 5 bring him 10 powerful mages or his daughter will die, because he kidnaps her at the end of book 9. So it's a hostage situation.
All right.
So it's kind of the same idea of like how much do you sacrifice for the people you love, or vice versa, right?
So reviewing old media through the same, well, reviewing new and created media through lenses that you found within old media, right?
Well, not necessarily. I mean, like, yes, but no. Yes, but actually no. Um,
Yes, but no. Yeah, exactly what I mean.
but one of the things, like this, I actually came up with this idea before I had rewatched Infinity War recently. But what I had was an idea of Colin and Aisha, his wife, basically teaming up with Reyna, the life mage, as that we had from previous conversations. Um, Basically, kind of gaming the system. Because the thing is, Tarragon needs to acquire Colin's dagger, which you can only acquire by killing the recipient. But if they kind of if they kind of figured that he was going to die in the first place, they could give him pre-planned resurrection contingency. Like, we're going to cast a resurrection spell on you, and then if you die, you're going to come back, like immediately. But it has, it has a time limit, right? That's just one of the things you can do if you have a couple of really powerful mages on your side and you think you're going to walk right into a trap. You could do a pre-planned resurrection contingency.
Yeah, the backup plan. I wish.
However, the thing that I kind of came up with recently, as an idea is, Tarragon wants 10 powerful mages. There's no reason that he would, and there's not necessarily a reason why he would know that Colin possesses the dagger until he sees him. So, my thought was, what if the two of them go, Colin and Aisha, together, and Tarragon, and the pre-planned contingency is on Aisha instead, because she's basically like, I'll trade myself for my daughter. Okay, because he needs powerful mages to cast this spell that is supposed to break the big barrier.
So it's the pushing the extent of as far as someone is willing to go, like there, or is that the theme through which the thread is seen? Or
ignore the theme for the moment, I guess.
Okay.
What I'm looking for is, it kind of makes more sense for him to want to take Aisha until he lays eyes on Colin. And he says, he has the final dagger that I need, and I had no idea, and he just kind of delivered himself into my hands. So instead, he kills Colin for good. Because he doesn't have a contingency on him, because they weren't planning for that. They were planning it for Aisha instead.
So game over for Colin.
Game over for Colin. Aisha still technically lives. They do get the daughter back. But then Aisha is basically Tarragon's prisoner until book 12. But then when she is sacrificed in the ritual to summon Akil the Destroyer, then the planned contingency comes in, and she basically rises back up kind of behind him and helps take him down.
Sounds like a plot to me.
To me, I think that would be a fun little bit of foreshadowing. And I think it makes a little bit more sense in terms of how it goes than the thing I have currently in place.
A plot's just a series of if-thens. I mean, I think it fits. I think it fits. I think it's useful.
Yeah. I also was thinking about what I want for Reyna in the long term, whether I want her to be able to bring Michael back or not. Um, I don't know. Part of me thinks it's like I want to leave them in a place where even if he can't come back, like I don't know, she's unknowingly pregnant with his child or something, where like he'll still have, or she will still have a small part of him with her.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but at the same time, that just kind of almost feels like generation Xeroxing, since his father left his mother before Michael was, before Michael and Mariah, his twin, were born. So not left them on purpose necessarily. I still haven't decided that bit yet, but the point is, it would basically just be another level of, the tragic cycle that now they're all forced to live through again. I don't know if I want to go that route, but I'm still struggling with whether I want to make this something with a tragic ending or something with a happier ending.
So that I gotta think you'd figure out in the moment of reaching that point.
I guess
That
so.
that might just be because that's what kind of happened with World's books. Is that's where I'm at. So I've got the story up to that point. I've got that general idea, plot point by plot point by plot point. But what feels right to capstone it, what feels right to finish it, is entirely dependent on everything fitting together up until that point. That's the way I see it.
You're probably right. It's just it's kind of supposed to be the culmination of the 9 books or the 8 books prior to it, and it's just I want to get it right. I want to be building towards the moment. I don't want it to be a spur of the moment thing when I'm in the middle of writing book 12, and then
Yeah.
I don't want to pull a How I Met Your Mother, where it's like I had this plan from the beginning, but then things changed along the way, and now the ending makes no sense because I didn't change the ending to go with the evolution of the story
Right.
along the way. I don't want to do that.
A Lost either, where you just keep complicating it.
Right, exactly. I don't want to
Yeah.
be in that place. I want to be something where the story is a consistent whole. But to do that, you kind of have to plan everything from the beginning or be willing to rewrite everything as the story evolves.
Yeah.
Why don't you short story it?
That's not a terrible idea.
Write out a couple of different endings that you could see it going, and see which one plays the best and which one you're the most excited about, and then follow that path.
I like that. That might solve my problem.
That kind of reminds me of the snowflake method. You're supposed to short story and then build up from there, but I think it's a lot cleaner cut and useful.
Really? I always got the impression the snowflake method was a planning method.
Mm-hmm.
It's supposed to be a short single sentence turns into 3, turns into
That's not a short story.
short story.
No.
It's growing a single idea from a seed into a fully developed story. Is the idea of it.
We could make the rabbit a stash.
Not a bad idea.
What? I think I missed something.
Sorry. We got a broken rabbit from Michael's today. It was completely irrelevant to the point.
A broken rabbit. I'm assuming
Yes.
it's not a real live rabbit.
It is not a real live rabbit.
Okay,
Anymore.
It's stuffed.
Gotcha.
It was never real. It's just one of those plastic like statue things.
Oh my gosh. How many
And
is
a
this? 243 times 3. So 729.
Yep, that's What's that? 4 stages down?
I don't even know, man. I mean, like, it's
Sentence into sentence into sentence. It's just
yeah,
like a
that's the
breaking.
extended bit. Like, this is yeah, it's like
I just don't like that.
1A.
It's not good. It was not fun.
Good grief. 1A or A1AI 1A. Like, good
Or
God.
just AI A1 broken down into 3 contiguous parts, A, B, and C, of course. Like that's the part that helps, I guess, is that you're breaking down bigger ideas into smaller ones. But you've got to have a really fucking big idea to break down into enough pieces to make a story, in my
Yeah.
opinion.
Yeah, definitely. And unfortunately, this particular method doesn't really work well for alternate viewpoints, as I've discovered.
Yeah, because once you're established in one way, you're kind of fucked all the way down the tree from there.
Yeah, so, I mean, like, for example, let's say I wanted to take an aside somewhere in, I don't know, part 1B or 1A, 1B.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Then, I want to take an aside, but where do I put it? Because it's not enough for a big idea, and it doesn't really fit in there, so it's like, okay, I have to put it in somewhere here, but then, yeah, it doesn't, the snowflake method doesn't really lend itself well to having multiple viewpoints unless the multiple viewpoints are going to get long sections of their own.
Right, because those are going to get blown up and blown up and blown up as you go down the tree.
Right. So, like, in my current story, in the strong stand, like, these little bits where, the bad guy kind of monologues to himself, at the end of every chapter is not something that could be really adequately planned by a snowflake method.
Expanded. Yeah.
I do
Well,
really.
maybe you have to prune the tree as you move along. Some portions of the snowflake are skippable, and some are worth digging down into. I gotta wonder if the digging is what makes the ideas good.
Could be. It could be. Oh man.
Hey,
Speaking,
hold up.
speaking of more background and world building.
Yeah, I think we're getting into like themes there, like story ideas or fundamental plot elements.
I think I showed you this one, didn't I, Neko?
Which was that?
The the foods.
Oh yeah, that looked awesome.
Yeah, one of the
Like the
things.
idea of the created recipes.
Yeah, one of the things I really liked about the Scott Lynch books, the Lies of Lacamora, and the following books, is that they would take that little bit of time to just sort of sprinkle a little bit of food description in there, and it was mentioned as like part of the culture. Like you have this chef is really good at or this culture is really focused on food, so their chefs are the best. Like the difference between a French chef and some other kind of chef.
Mm-hmm.
Like because France is so big on food. But yeah, that was one of the things I saw and I really liked, and I kind of wanted to make sure that I had some of those things to sprinkle throughout the story in such a way as to make it feel like the world is really full of life, like really full of these small details. Even if it's not, even I don't have to plan you know, a, a, a cuisine down to every bit of it, but I can get good ideas and um, base stuff on kind of rough palettes of flavors and ingredients. Also, I came up with a currency system because that was part of it too.
Okay. I was stoked on the mixing there, the creation of new histories for what you got the currencies for different locations too.
Yeah, so there's people who follow the Nelarian based currency, the Shinrinian or imperial currency, in the Loean currency, and each country basically adheres to a different currency method. Um, but and they're all based on different number systems too. So, for example, there are seven sasts to a meknen, and there are 14 nietzes to a sast.
Mm-hmm.
But the imperial system is strictly based on tens to make things easy, which is why everybody uses it. And then this one is the one where it gets weird. So that's 4/3 of the meknens, and then that's 12 of those and 12 of those. Because
Okay.
not every like I kind of took some inspiration from the British monetary system before they went into cents and pounds.
And then you've got currency exchanges as well. And
Yes. Yeah,
yeah.
that was
Okay.
another thing from the books is they mentioned anytime they went to a city they had to change their currency over, and I was like, "Oh, yeah, of course they would. Of course you would have to change the currency because unless you're in a system like an Imperial Roman system where, everybody uses the same currency because they're ruled by the same people are going to use different weights and measures and conversion systems. And that's
But
just
it's,
an, that's just another one of those details that kind of makes the world feel a little bit more real.
it makes the world feel more real. Makes is that a thing that like extends beyond this world here? Or I'm trying, because I'm not sure how that's relevant to the story itself. It gives it a realistic detail
It's not relevant to the story. It's relevant to the
to the
world,
world.
and it's in service of making the world feel just that little bit more real. Um,
Mhm.
to give that illusion of depth, like, or in my case, it may not be as much of an illusion. Yikes. Um,
That's the scary part. Like,
right, and that's why I had to ask that question: how much world building is too much? Right? I mean, is creating cuisine styles for 8 different cultures, is that too much? Is it? I don't know.
oh, not if you actually try and make those things, because I'm really curious to how they taste. This is like this is the ultimate cutthroat kitchen challenge. I'd say is create a dish for a cuisine that is entirely fictional. Yes, please.
Does it affect your story?
Like right. That's the
Does it
important part.
affect your world?
It affects my world in that it is supposed to highlight the abundance of cultures in a system where there are 6 different countries existing on a single continent, and they're all very, very different from each other, and they've existed in, I guess in that sense it's very, very slightly um, tangential to the story, because part of the story is that the world, or this continent at least, exists in a state of a sort of very tentatively balanced peace, but basically kept in place only by the sort of tyranny of the Shinrinian Imperator.
Mhm.
And if that system is upset in any way, if that balance is tipped in one way or the other, things can rapidly come apart, which is kind of what happens. So even though it's not direct indication of what's going to happen in that sense, the idea that these are very, very different cultures, even based on their foods are very, very different. And so, you can kind of give the characters a little bit of it it sort of emphasizes the size of the world to the character who is new to it. One
Mhm.
who's only ever eaten one kind of food, but now he's out in the world and he's eating all kinds of different foods, and he's like, "This is crazy. The world is so big." So it's relevant to that character, kind of, but it also emphasizes how very different the cultures and the countries are, and it also shows that even countries that might be simplified to, hey, they're the bad guy, has something interesting and good about it, because everybody loves food.
It's true.
True.
Like even Nazi Germany, at the height of their evilness, they still made good schnitzel, right? So like even if you could say nothing else good about Nazi Germany, you could say, well, you know what? I hate everything about them, but they do make good schnitzel.
Yeah, those bastards. They're fucking.
And
Yes.
kind of the idea that they're like even even somebody you kind of view as the enemy might have something interesting or worthwhile or unique to explore, to appreciate about them. So
Yeah.
again, it's not directly relevant to the story, no, but it
It provides
does
sort of
hint
like,
at some broader themes, I guess.
okay. So like Katara and the Bloodbender is like where we're going here. Things that are culturally relevant, but also twisted to specific ways.
Yeah, kind of, a little bit. We just watched back through that. So good.
Yes. Oh, I can't wait.
So good. Gosh, that's we could go down a whole other rabbit hole about that, but
We're gonna
the
watch it and look at it.
the people who say that kids media doesn't have to be good, like it's fine to make garbage because it's for kids, and it's like no, look at Avatar: The Last Airbender. It is a phenomenally made show for kids, but it holds up even rewatching it as an adult. Like it's just so good, and you don't have to shovel garbage at children. You can make good stuff for them. Please do, in fact.
Mm-hmm. Stuff that carries. That's another thing. Like where you are in life changes how you view it.
That is true too.
I think it enhances and enriches it, and we've gone full circle.
Yes. Yes, we have. And since we have now ended where we began, it seems that now might be a good time to wrap it all up, eh?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. That. All right. So, yeah, that was wonderful.
I had a wonderful time, and I hope you did too.
Mm-hmm. It's. I always love these talks, man.
Me
Like,
too. I always enjoy hearing Savvy's perspective on things as well.
mm-hmm. All right. Well, we're gonna sign off. I'll hopefully we can do this again soon.
I hope so. Ugh. Well, no smoking. And otherwise have a good night, man.
You too. I'll talk to you
And you
later.
too, Savvy. It was nice
Have a good night.
nice jamming with you both.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Bye bye now.
Bye.